The beginning of the universe. The end of relativity. Carlos L. Partidas. Copyright 2022 Carlos Partidas. Legal Deposit Audiobook, MI 2022000019. 1. From Philosophy to Science. Theoretical and experimental science have gone through the different stages of human thought. Possibly one of the objectives of this search is to know how the universe originated. Therefore, at the beginning, this inquiry was full of mysteries and cults, but perhaps it would be a way to find the identity of oneself as a living being and as a spirit. The history of the human being as a body-spirit duality, we could say that it began with the Egyptians, because they wrote on the walls of the tombs the Book of the Dead. Then, the message had to be written on papyrus, since it was easier to edit the message written on a parchment than on the rocks of the tombs. Therefore, in addition to the papyrus, his belongings were placed in the sarcophagus of the deceased person, so that he could use them after his return. That is to say that, since the ancient Egyptian thinkers, it was known that the spirit was still alive after the death of the body. So, they tried to guide the spirit to return from the afterlife. It would be the same with Greek philosophers, as in the case of the mathematician and astronomer Claudius Ptolemy. However, our search for how the universe was formed will end with the complex numbers of the German genius Johann Carl Friedrich Gauss, and the theory of relativity of Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein would base his theory of relativity on a mathematical solution of Carl Friedrich Gauss and a non-Euclidean geometric figure. So, for Albert Einstein, a physical phenomenon would be the result of mathematics, but not that mathematics was useful to explain a physical phenomenon. For example, the terms imaginary number is different from complex number, since imaginary is something that only exists in the imagination. Therefore, imaginary is not something real. In the numerical system of the Greek mathematician and philosopher Aristotle, an imaginary space is that which extends beyond the spheres, and where bodies, place, and emptiness are not admitted. That is to say that, for Aristotle, the imaginary is absolute nothingness. However, we can say that the vacuum exists, but in the vacuum nothing exists. In such a way that, the universe began to form at a point in the center of the vacuum and where nothing existed, because inside the vacuum, now is the universe. That is to say, the universe is real, and everything that exists in the universe is authentic, since the imaginary does not exist because it is not real. Whereas, when we say complex, we mean something that is composed of several elements. So, all complex elements are real. So, we cannot say that in the universe there are imaginary phenomena, since everything that exists in the universe is tangible. So, Carl Gauss had to look for a real solution within a complex value, that is, to get a real value among several real elements, since the complex is there in a real way, but it is not a value that we have to imagine, but the solution from the mathematical point of view is a shortcut to find an explanation of something real. But, in an imaginary way, Albert Einstein considered that the universe has a non-Euclidean geometry, and that the mass that was formed at the initial point of the universe could not be real, but that the initial mass of the universe was imaginary in the case that a particle could move faster than light. However, Albert Einstein did not know that elementary energy had no mass, and that it could rotate and move faster than light. And what we can prove in this year 2022, is that the initial mass of the universe is real, and that this mass is still growing in a progressive way since it started to form at the initial point. It is a process of accretion that has been going on for 13.8 billion years but is not yet finished and cannot be finished. The shape of the universe is spherical, since energy radiates to all points equally in space. And a sphere is the only geometric shape where we can have an infinite number of ellipses in a progressive way, therefore, the geometry of the universe is spherical, and cannot be ellipsoidal. So, the universe cannot be configured by a non-Euclidean geometry, as Albert Einstein thought mathematically and geometrically, since the energy of the universe is completely filling the volume of a sphere, and in the volume there cannot be spaces without energy. In the universe, only two kinds of energies are mainly produced from the motion of a quantum: 1. The electronic energy, which is united by other integrating energy forces to form the electronic matter, and 2. The magnetic energy, which is formed by the motion of the electronic energy, and which, being united by other energy forces, this integrated magnetic energy becomes conscious of itself. We can demonstrate the existence of electronic matter, since we see it and can grasp and weigh it. However, magnetic energy, occasionally we cannot see it, neither can we weigh it, for this energy, although it exists and is conscious of its existence, is a form of energy that does not contain any kind of matter. But, if what we want is to see the energy that moves the body, all we have to do is to stand in front of a mirror. That is to say, the energy of the spirits is a real energy, but we will not be able to see it from the physical world. Therefore, not everything can be considered under a purely material concept. A visual example that seems real but is imaginary are the images that are formed in dreams, since these figures that are produced in the mind are not real. They are imaginary forms, and because they are not real, these images do not settle in the permanent memory of the brain. When the brain loses the physical guidance of the eyes, electronic images are formed on a screen, and the brain places these images in a logical sequence, and sets them in motion as in a cartoon movie. So, the story of the dream is logical, but this story has no real meaning. The brain just wanders uncontrollably between the different electronic images, which is different from leaving the body to travel in time in a real way. However, I was not asleep to say that my story was imaginary, for what happened to me was one morning. I was at the side of the road and I was about 5 years old, and I could see the blue horizon between the two hills that formed an angle between them, and by whose vertex the sun ascended like a bright disk. I remained in suspense observing how the sun ascended between the two mountains, and I began to cry. I wondered aloud to myself, what I was doing here, and why I came from the Sunday. Very close to me, there was a tree with big roots, and between the roots I sat down to cry, and I thought to myself, and now I will have to work to be able to live. At the same time I kept looking, how the sun was rising between the two mountains. It would be like a way of describing the scene, but the image is not forgotten, for it was not imaginary, it was a real image, so, I grew up remembering that I came from the Sunday. Of course, I was a child, and I could not tell adults what I observed that morning. Nor did I feel the need to tell, since, as a child, that event was normal. I thought that the distance between the sun and the earth was very short, so, I only had to approach the mountain to be in the sun again. But my spirit had to be different from the spirit of the other children, and it was different, because as a child I could see the spirits and ran after them to reach them. I didn't know they were spirits, but all spirits are not the same, and each one of them has a stamp that makes them look different. It's like seeing a person. I didn't understand why they didn't walk like me. It was as if they were flying along the road without touching the ground, and I wanted to know how they did it, so I ran after them to see why they walked that way. Then, when I was a young adult, I learned how to get out of my body, and I would walk through walls or metal doors. And I deduced that spirits are made of magnetic energy, while the body is made of electronic matter. Magnetic energy can pass through any surface made by electronic matter without being intercepted, which can be proved by means of a Faraday cage. One day I was going with my brother, I would have been about 7 years old and my brother 4. But it is impossible for a child to know how old he or she is, because a child does not live with the notion of time. When we are children we only live in an eternal moment, so, I also didn't know what the distance between the sun and the earth was, and what it meant to have to work for a living. It got dark and it was raining, so I told my brother that we would have to stay in that house, as we were not going to be able to get home. To get to the house at the top, we climbed up a slope of whitish earth. And when we arrived, we were attended by a gentleman, but I suppose that the lady was the gentleman's wife. They kindly told us to take off our clothes and put them to dry, and they gave us a hot drink, but what I don't remember is what kind of drink it was. I only remember that it was hot. They put us to bed in hammocks. The next day I woke up and could see that it was getting light. I told my brother that we had to leave, so we put on our clothes that were already dry. I don't remember if we said goodbye to our 2 friends, Mr. and Mrs., but maybe they were still sleeping. The truth is, as we descended the slope to continue on the road back to our house, a man saw us and asked us where we had spent the night. I pointed out to him, and told him that in that house. He was surprised, and told us that nobody lived in that house. But my older brother reminded me of that, because my younger brother told him. I remembered it, but I didn't give importance to the event. Then, I told it to my younger brother, but he remembered it clearly, even though at that time he was only 4 years old and I was 7 years old. And I would not finish if I had to tell other stories about the spirits that we only see as children, although I still see them later as an adult. Spirits are not like a formless energy, they are exactly the same as the figure of the person when he/she was alive. So, the holographic stamp of the spirit is an exact copy of its last genetic code. And this copy must be after the body on earth has reached a certain age, because the holographic image of a child that dies, its spirit will have the form of a child, so, we will not be able to see a spirit crawling like a baby. Another day my name was called, and when I opened my eyes to see, it was my uncle. But my uncle was 25 years dead, and I knew him when he was alive. So, I could recognize that he was my uncle, because his appearance was the same as when he was alive. Therefore, the spirit does not disappear when the body dies, but neither is it like an energy that wanders without any form, for the energy of the spirit continues to live in its spiritual world. However, the spirit makes an energetic copy of its genetic code so that we can identify it, since the body is only the temporary residence for the spirit to inhabit. But, in addition, the spirit has memory, although it has no brain, so the spirit's memory is also energetic, because my uncle's spirit remembers my name and can identify me. That is to say, the spirit knows who I am, and I know whose spirit is. We could think that the spirit is born when the physical body is born, however, that would not explain to me why I cried when I knew that I came from the Sunday. Nor would I understand the existence of my uncle's spirit. But, everything indicates that the spirit lives on after the energy of the spirit has separated from the electronic matter of the body. These are events that I know, and the other spirits that I saw I did not know. That is, for me, they were not spirits but energetic figures. So, we cannot think that all the spirits of the universe exist only on earth. It means that I came from the sun, but I was born on earth as a human being from a diploid, that is to say that I joined the embryo when the fetus was already defined and had the conditions to be born, and to achieve the plan of what I came to do and what I had to be. So, I joined the embryo as a spirit, with the purpose of living in a body as a human being to fulfill a mission, and we all have a purpose that we must plan before we are born. So, in the first moments of gestation, the diploid does not have a spirit assigned to it, that is to say that a haploid is not driven by the energy of a spirit. Nor could I explain the mathematical ability of the German child Johann Carl Friedrich Gauss, since the child Carl Gauss was born into a humble family in Germany. Perhaps Carl Gauss' parents had no idea how to solve an elementary mathematical equation. It is said that Carl Gauss' mother could not read properly. The story of the boy Carl Friedrich Gauss would be different from the other German child genius Amadeus Mozart, since Amadeus' father was a musician. So, the skill for a physical activity is an integral part of the spirit, but it is not a quality of the body in which the spirit dwells. The spirit is the real energy that activates the body, and it is what gives form and lifestyle to the body of a human being. In other words, the spirit is the energy that learns and has a real existence. In such a way that, the dexterity is brought integrated by the spirit and is part of its progressive evolution as an energetic being. When it decides to be born, the spirit will have to erase its previous silhouette, because it would be impossible to distinguish his/her image, once the spirit is separated from the body. The previous images are not important, since the spirit progresses from his or her last station on its long evolutionary path, and it would not make sense for an earthly spirit to devolve, or to go backwards to start again. Then I listen to what my friend says about her twins. They are 3 years old, but we are interested in the twins because they both have a genetic code that is practically the same, therefore, the two spirits should also be energetically identical. And it seems that this is not so, because they are two different spirits, but they live in two identical bodies from the physical point of view. One of the twins tells his mother that such and such is easy, and when the mother asks him who taught him that, the boy answers that his grandfather. But the boy's grandfather has been dead for 20 years. So, my friend's twins were not born when the grandfather died, and, apparently the other child cannot see his grandfather's spirit. However, the child who can see his grandfather's spirit recognizes him as his grandfather, which means that the twins' grandfather must have copied the physical image he had when he lived in the physical body in order to explain to the child that he is his grandfather, that is, that he is his mother's father. The father of the twins' mother is not really dead, but he does not have a body to be in the physical world. He is only an energetic figure. And we don't get to live in both worlds at the same time, or we can't be one time in the spiritual world and another time in the physical world, because the body in the physical world deteriorates when it doesn't have the energy of the spirit. So, it does not make sense to have to go back and forth from one world to the other all the time, but, apparently the spirits do not wish to return to this earthly underworld. The Egyptians must still be waiting for their pharaohs to return, and for these rulers to wake up from their tombs with their bones, and with the papyrus where the instructions of how to return are inscribed. However, the spirit of the pharaoh has not yet returned, nor will it be able to return as the same pharaoh. Although in other religions it is believed that that moment will come tomorrow, but tomorrow does not exist, since tomorrow is imaginary, therefore, tomorrow will never come. Time was invented by the human being, and it is what makes the human being live in a constant cycle. For example, every year the same Christmas or the same carnival is celebrated. To be back in a physical body, the only way is to be incorporated into a diploid, but if it is decided to be born again, the spirit will have to renounce its previous family. For example, the spirit of the grandfather will have to lose his previous grandchildren, because the grandfather has to form a new family on earth. That is, he will be a new daddy and become a grandfather again, so he will have new grandchildren and be a grandfather again. Maybe that disembodiment and rebirth is part of a cycle for the human being. The other case that is perhaps more real because of its similarity is the one my cousin tells me. My cousin is the son my uncle had before he became a spirit, that is to say, the uncle who called me. My cousin has a 4-year-old girl, but the girl has been talking to herself since she was 3 years old. My cousin asks the girl who she is talking to, and the girl says her grandfather. The girl looks for the picture of her father's father to say that this is the grandfather she is talking to, but my cousin's father, that is, the girl's grandfather, who is my uncle who called me, has been dead for 25 years. So, my uncle's granddaughter was not born when my uncle died, and the girl's dad, that is the son of the girl's grandfather, was a child when his dad died. So, the spirit makes a copy of his physical stamp, because the spirit of the girl's grandfather is the same as the one in the picture. But making a copy of the last physical figure is the only way we have to be able to identify the spirits of the two grandparents, that is, the grandfather of the twins who are my friend's children, and the spirit of the grandfather of my cousin's daughter, because the two grandfathers are different. They are both spirits, that is to say an energy, but they are not like an energy that has no form or direction, but it is like seeing a person in a holographic or energetic form. And it is evident that both of them are still living as spirits on Earth after 20 and 25 years, therefore, at least these two are not spirits that came from other galaxies. The genetic code that gives the stamp to the physical body is formed between the base pairs adenine, thymine and guanine, cytosine, in such a way that any information that you want to see and transcribe is really encoded, although we will not be aware of it. Look, for example, at the letters on this sheet and you will see that each letter is only a picture. But without knowing it, we can place these drawings in a different order, whose average is 5 drawings or letters for each word. And with a set of words we will be able to form a sentence, and with another sentence we will be able to express an idea. It is in this way, or by putting together the drawings of the letters, are written all the books in libraries and digital magazines and newspapers that may exist and those that will exist. So, everything is an image that can be represented in various forms. The memory and the character of a spirit is a quality proper to the spirit, and the knowledge it gained belongs to the spirit because it is an individual achievement. Also its way of being, its desire to learn, his empathy and his evolution, it is a characteristic that the spirit has conquered through its own efforts. That is his or her qualia, and in this way, we have spirits with different qualia. But, the qualia is what identifies each spirit with its way of being, and each spirit has a different mission from that of other spirits, since each one of the spirits brings engraved his or her character, his or her skills or abilities, and all this represents the true identity of the spirit. There are spirits that when they are born want to be scientists, but the quality or desire to be a scientist cannot be externalized. So, where we must observe the skill of a spirit is in oratory and music, that is to say, in the ability to express oneself or to execute an instrument. Even before birth, embryos are already pianists, as in the case of the Russian child Elisy Mysin. But this explains why an increasing number of child geniuses are being born, child musicians, child athletes, orators, politicians, and scientists who bring their inherent abilities as their own, which they demonstrate with their skills in every field in the physical world. But there are also autistic children, and other children with congenital deformities, due to mistakes made during gestation, but this is not the fault of the embryo. In fact, since gestation and growth, physical activity depends on factors of chemical nature, so we can modify the chemical activity of the body with other chemical substances. For example, organic diseases depend only on factors related to the style of eating. Whereas, the spirit is the energy that directs and learns. So, if as a spirit one is not aware of this reality, the spirit can subject the body to errors in an unconscious way. For example, eating is a voluntary act, therefore, how and what you want to eat depends on the knowledge of the spirit. but eventually a new being will be born consisting of a body and a spirit. So, if the spirit remains alive eternally and wishes to be born again at another time, and the spirit, it will have to copy the physical form at the new time, because the quality of the spirit is not lost by the recurrence of multiple births. Only he will have a new family and will be another grandfather, but the spirit will remain the same spirit for millions of years. He is the only one who can decide if he will opt for another body, for which he will have to leave his old body, and only then, he will be able to assume a new life in his cycle of being born and being born again. Or in a great lodge of evolved spirits who are not of the earth, the mission can be raised to help correct the behavior of a civilization, and in this assembly, it would be decided who will incarnate to represent the plan of the congregation, with the purpose of saving a civilization anywhere in the universe. To achieve, for example, that on Earth the fundamental rights of the animals are fulfilled, since, on Earth, the animals as well as the human being, have the same right to exist as incarnated beings. But, the animals are Earthlings, since the only ones who demarcated a territory on Earth are the humans, and these plots are called countries, but in reality, as earthly human beings, we all have the same right to live anywhere on Earth. Neither does the spirit involute, as Pythagoras thought, who said that the spirit was formed by fire and air, and therefore, it could incarnate sometimes as a human and sometimes as an animal. Pythagoras appreciated and valued the right of animals to exist, so Pythagoras bought captive animals in the markets to free them from that misfortune. Therefore, Pythagoras would be the first known vegetarian. But, most probably, Pythagoras did not know that eating the meat of a genetic and energetic brother causes harm to the body of the human being. So, the doctrine of Pythagoras did not take root in the consciousness of the human being. Consciousness can only be awakened by reason, and the consumption of cells and proteins of animal meat is what creates the 5 organic diseases. According to those who have been dead and come back to earthly life, that pets are also spirits, but perhaps that pets are also spirits that took a diploid different from a human being. So, we should be affected equally and emotionally, if the animal is a horse, a cow, a lamb, a pig, an ant, a whale, or a giraffe, since all living beings are formed by energetic forces, which move a set of cells, and all these cells are chemically the same, since the only thing that identifies each one in a physical way is the genetic code. So, our mission is to defend through reasoning the right to live that all animals have, and to achieve this, we must identify the child geniuses, to leave them the foundations and an orientation, that is, a knowledge of how is this process of birth and death and rebirth of all living beings, in order to help the child to fulfill its mission. Since, among its purposes, may be the need to form a society of adult geniuses, so that among all, we can direct the direction that should take the thought of the new humanity, that is, a new thought, because death does not exist. The process of the death of the body is imaginary, since what we call death is a necessary change that we must make to pass from one form of life to another, which happens because the electronic matter of the body is changeable, while the magnetic energy of the spirit is eternal. But, the fact that I came from the sun, very few will believe it, because they think that life is only the physical form, but it is impossible for a physical body to live in the Sunday. The magnetic energy of a spirit is not affected by electronic matter, and the sun is made up of electronic matter. So, the spirit is not affected by the temperature or incandescent matter that the sun may have. The flares in the solar corona only occur in the sun's corona, and at a distance that is very far from the sun's surface. The sun is growing, and it may be that it is increasing the thickness of the energetic corona, for which reason, perhaps we will no longer be able to see the surface of the sun with a telescope, as William Herschel observed it. Unless it is all a figment of William Herschel's imagination, but the truth is that William Herschel was not asleep when he looked through his telescope. So, he had to explain to me why I could communicate with spirits, while other people cannot. But if I wanted to know what is the origin of these two energies, I had to know what kind of energy the universe is made of, and what is the origin of the universe, so that I could understand the origin of everything that exists in the universe. And it was in this way that I was able to give a logical sense to everything that exists in the universe, including spirits and living beings, since there are spirits that do not have the desire or the need to participate as living beings in the physical world. For example, the Earth is only a point in the universe, and we will not pretend that all spiritual beings have to pass through the Earth to evolve. So, there must be Solarian beings who have no interest in being Earthlings. However, we all live within the sphere we call universe, and this is the only universe we have, because there is no other universe, since this universe was formed by the motion of a boson, and two bosons with an identical amount of energy cannot coexist in the same quantum level, because both bosons would unite forming a single boson of higher energy. So, only one universe could be formed, although the universe is not conscious of its existence, for the conscious part of the universe is the spirits, and the spirits form an integral part of the universe.